The problem we're trying to solve is that there are rich teams and there are poor teams. Then there's 50 feet of crap. And then there's us. It's an unfair game. If we try to play like the Yankees in here, we will lose to the Yankees out there.
Hello and welcome once again to the Cine-Files, where each week we enter the world of a great film, we explore its themes, the history, the filmmaking, and the influence it has on us today. My name is Steve Morris, and I'm a filmmaker and directing instructor in Los Angeles, California.
Hello, everyone. My name is John Roca. I'm a writer, producer, and host over there on the Outlaw Nation, and avid sports fan, host a sports show on the Outlaw Nation. And this is one of those rare weeks where Steve and I get to explore a sports movie. So I am even more excited to be co-hosting the show today with Steve.
Well, I'm certainly glad of that. And it's funny because we actually did a couple of sports movies this year or last year, including one that I think relates to this movie, and that, of course, is Major League. There's a real Major League Moneyball connection, in my opinion.
Yeah, certainly.
And of course, that's the film we're doing, Moneyball. But the reason we're doing it is this is the first film from 2011, the first film allowed by our 10-year rule to be done on the Cine-Files, and it was chosen by all of you listeners. Yeah. And we put out our listener survey every year, and this one, well, the ones in the past have been blowouts.
Yeah.
Like this one was not. And here are some of the other films that kind of came close. Captain America, The First Avenger was close. Tree of Life was close. But the one that was neck and neck and only missed by one vote is The Raid Redemption.
Which I imagine by default we will at some point talk about The Raid Redemption.
That's probably true. But you chose a Moneyball. And this is a film. Well, let me ask you first, John, how did you first come to this film?
I remember going to see it in the theater. I don't remember if it was with Shannon or with our crew of people. I can't imagine it was a wide berth of people because baseball isn't really in the purview of a lot of our fellow theater friend or movie friends. So I think it was just a few people that went to go see it. And I just remember absolutely loving it because it was such a different type of sports movie. And Steve, before we started doing the podcast a few days ago when we considered this on our live show for Transformers, if you guys haven't watched that or listened to that, please go back and do that. We were talking about Moneyball, and you said you weren't sure if it was a sports movie. And I will say, after having watched it again for the podcast, I'm even more sure that it is a sports movie and could be a fun conversation we have throughout the show. But I remember thinking how much it was such an unusual thing, almost like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind is an unusual romantic comedy. This is a phenomenally unusual sports movie. And of course, by a director who had, guided Philip Seymour Hoffman to an Oscar in Capote, Bennett Miller. So no surprise that we have a nerd directing a nerdy approach to baseball, and yet it works so well in this movie.
Well, it's funny you say that, John, because after I watched it, I am more convinced that it's not a sports movie. So we're definitely going to have that conversation.
It'll be a fun debate.
Of course, this is based on a true story about the A's and Billy Beane. It's based on the book by Michael Lewis, who followed Billy Beane for a year. And this deals with this idea of what's called Sabermetrics in baseball. Here's a little bit of pre-production. Rachel Horowitz, who's the producer, went off on vacation, and she said, I don't want to read anything that could possibly be a movie. I want to just relax. I don't want to deal with the movie industry at all. Oh, here's a nonfiction book about baseball and statistics. Right. I'm going to read that. And of course she went, man, this make a really good movie. And that's where it begins, gets picked up by Columbia. They hire Stan Shervin to write the script. And this is the story I wanted to tell, is that frequently there are movies that could have been a completely different movie.
Oh, yeah.
And David Frankel was brought in to direct this film. He directed The Devil Wears Prada. Steve Zalian was hired to write the script. He's got an amazing career with Searching for Bobby Fischer and Schindler's List, Falcon and the Snowman. He wrote Awakening, Civil Action. He wrote Gangs of New York. And then they fired David Frankel and brought in another director, which is Steven Soderbergh.
Yeah, Soderbergh.
And he wanted to direct a very, very different movie. And I have brought in a special surprise guest, John, to talk about that film because someone that is very near and dear to me worked on the Steven Soderbergh version of Moneyball.
Okay.
And that person is casting director, my wife, Karen P. Morris. Karen Morris, welcome back to the Cine-Files.
Hello, Cine-Files. It's good to be back.
Karen
P. Morris. I like that. I like that approach.
Gotta have the P. It's always
gotta have the P.
There are a million Karen Morrises, even in the entertainment business. It's weird.
That's right. That's right.
If I introduced her without the P, I would have to retake it.
There would
Yeah,
be
it's a
hell
fair
to
point.
pay.
Yeah, you'd be peed for sure. All right.
I would be peed.
Definitely would be Pete. So, Karen, how did you get hired to work on the Steven Soderbergh film Moneyball?
It was actually funny. I got an email from Carmen Cuba, who was the casting director originally. I think she end up doing the later one. I'm not sure, but
I don't think so.
She was the original one because she worked a lot with Soderbergh on things. And I got an email from her. I had never worked with her before, and it was a long process of waiting and interviewing, and it's going to start, it's not going to start, it's going to start, it's not going to start. And then I eventually came on at the very early stages when it was just Soderbergh and Brad Pitt was attached. And then mostly in the beginning there, we were just looking at actual real people from the book, scouts and baseball players and managers and things like that. And then also looking at a few key, slightly lesser known comics to pop in and do the Paul DePodesta role, which I think ended up not being Paul DePodesta, right? They ended up doing like a...
Right, they changed the name. So I'm going to start with these real people. So why were you interviewing real people for the movie?
Well, Soderbergh, as we know, really likes sort of a cinema verite kind of stuff. He really likes to do things that feel real. And so I think what the plan was is he wanted to do interviews with a bunch of these people, a lot of scouts, a lot of managers, things like that, so that he could intercut either voiceover or actual video of the interviews with these people in his version of the movie. I know that they had probably 20 or 30 people that he was planning on interviewing, and he was planning on doing the interviews himself. So they were really using that as a selling point when we were trying to get these guys to come in and do the interviews, that you're going to be interviewed by Soderbergh himself, and he wants to talk to you about your experiences either with Billy Beane. You know, these are people that came up with him or either on teams with him or scouted him, or, you know, I think one was his baseball coach from high school, I think, was even things like that. They really wanted to go deep to find how Billy Beane came up in baseball.
That's so curious because that sounds to me like the Steven Spielberg produced Once We're Brothers or We Were Brothers, or the World War II one from HBO, where they interspersed, you know, actors playing scenes out and then cut back to the actual people talking about that scenario, that situation. That in my mind, as you speak about it, Karen, I visualize it. I think that would have been an incredible approach to making this story for sure, and maybe would have added even more authenticity. Imagine if they had gotten Art Howe to chime in on some of the scenes or some of the situations and get Billy Beane, two countering points of views throughout the movie. So what an interesting approach for sure.
Well, yeah, and I mean, who else to do that better than Steven Soderbergh? Like,
exactly.
That's kind of the thing that he's really, really good at. So.
Yeah.
And by the way, John, they did have Art Howe.
Oh, wow.
Art Howe had agreed to be part of the film. And this is this thing I want people to imagine is, like, you look at a film and you go, well, obviously that's the only way you could tell this story. But in fact, there's lots and lots of ways you could tell a story, particularly a story like this that's nonfiction.
Sure.
So, Karen, is this a normal thing that you do, contacting athletes and agents and coaches and things like that? Is that something normal?
Agents of actors? Yes. Not agents of baseball players. Not, no, this was a very unusual thing for me. It was actually very uncomfortable at times because it was so outside my wheelhouse. And, you know, I know you guys know that Steve is not, you know, a huge sports fan, and you can imagine I am even less of a sports fan than he is. So I'm out there, luckily I did know some of the names, like when they said, contact Mookie Wilson and contact Darryl Strawberry, I actually knew who they were, but then they had me doing all these scout people. And I mean, I could list off a bunch of names for you because I pulled up the breakdown of the different things that we were doing, because it was just, I don't know who any of these people are. And I'm like having to reach out to them in a way that was, I'm used to dealing with agents and managers of actors who are used to people reaching out to talk to their people. I'm reaching out to these guys directly. I'm reaching out to their wives. I'm reaching out to their children. I mean, like, it was really, really unusual and weird. And it was definitely a learning curve.
Yeah, I imagine reaching out to the star ball players is no different than reaching out to the not to the actors and actresses. You might have divas on both sides of the ledger there, but when you start to go into the scouts, that's more of the nitty gritty. That's the day-to-day guys staying at the Howard Johnsons, eating out of vending machines. So naturally, they might have a little bit of hesitation or suspicion about having to talk to a casting director out of Hollywood about something they were involved in. And most of these people roll on just to the next season. They're not as enamored or, get caught up in the magic of a particular season as much. They're lifers. So that must have been very interesting to kind of figure out how to speak to people like this, for sure.
Yeah, it definitely was. And it was funny too, because when I was looking through my emails this morning, because I'm a pack rat and I don't get rid of anything, but I have passports and, social security cards that people were like emailing me for their start paperwork so that we could pay them to do these interviews and stuff. Because I was talking, like I said, to a lot of these people directly. And so like I have, emails back and forth with, some of these people that, again, I can't remember all their names because there were so many of them, but it was just funny to think I'm just going, hey, I can't read the number on your passport. Can you confirm for me what those numbers are? And then I'd hand it off to the payroll people so that they could get that stuff done. It was just funny and weird.
Well, that sort of answers my next question, because I was going to ask, how far along in the process did you get?
When I was looking through the emails, when I had left the project, there was a ton more of that stuff coming in. And so I was responding to all of these people saying, you need to talk to this guy, Alan, who's there. Because what happened is I was on it for about a month and they were waiting on a script revision, and the script revision just wasn't coming, and it wasn't coming, and it wasn't coming. And after a while, they just couldn't justify having me and this other guy, Alan, who was he was, I think, more of an assistant, and he was more working on the specifically baseball side of things. And I was going to be more of the associate, working more on the actorly side of things when that finally happened, but it just never did. And so they eventually kind of dropped me off, kept him on, and then I was kind of forwarding things back and forth to him saying, Alan, can you confirm with Ted that he got this? Can you confirm with John that you got this? And it was just kind of a thing.
So you get brought onto a film. There's not a finished script, but they're obviously spending a lot of money. I mean, is there a big staff? Are there producers? What's going on in the project outside of your office?
We definitely there was a production office. We were set up at one of the smaller studios. I can't remember, but it's one of the ones in Hollywood, one of the smaller studios in Hollywood. We were set up there. There was accounting, there was production. I believe, there must have been ADs and everything already, because we were talking about schedules. Because that was one of the interesting things, is that, like John was saying, these are guys that are in and out of motels and just going from this to that to the other thing. We were trying to do this. I think it was during when scouting was going to be happening again.
Oh my God.
And so I think they were planning on shooting in June, and I think it was like a real. I bow down to ADs so much. I would never, ever want that job. It is one of the most difficult and thankless jobs on the planet. But you can imagine if you're an AD trying to deal with the regular stuff that we deal with locations and actors and schedules and all that kind of stuff. But then to throw in that you've got this random scout who's flying literally all over the country to check out the next baseball player at this high school or this college or this, whatever. And so they were like, well, if you can guarantee that it's going to be on this date, you got to deal with this guy. But if the date moves at all, there's a very good chance that you're not going to have him. And so it was just...
Right.
Even more, I feel like it was even more stressful about that than it usually is, because these people are so transient with the way that they live their lives going from point A to point B.
I can only imagine, because you're talking about people whose livelihoods depends on them finding the next big star, the next big player for their organization. And God help them if they send in a report a few hours after another team has already sent in their scouter report and has like started the process of signing a kid that would have been great for the team you were scouting for, on all because a movie studio ran behind or had to change the day or had to change the hours. I mean, I can't even imagine how trying to finagle all of that. That sounds daunting as hell.
Just to reinforce this, part of what Karen's talking about is the job of the AD is to make the schedule, and they're balancing so many variables already because they have actors' schedules, they have all of these scouts and baseball players' schedules, and then they have, well, you can only use this location at this time, and there are all these budgetary concerns because maybe a location is really expensive or a particular actor is really expensive, and you have to shoot them out in 3 days.
Well, and then there's things like you can only shoot till 9 p.m. at this location because it's a residential location, and part of the contract is, quiet hours at a certain time. And so, there's just so many variables.
Yeah, it is so complicated to figure out. So what's so crazy to me is that you're on a production that is barreling towards a shoot date. And then what happens?
My understanding is it just fell out of Columbia. I think what I heard was that Amy Pascal was not happy with the script revisions that were coming or not coming. And I think she just didn't want to put any more money into something that wasn't necessarily going to be what she was looking for. But that's just the little bit that I've gleaned from reading stuff.
And it sounds to me like, Soderbergh is a director at a level where if he wants to make the movie he wants to make. And if he's not going to be able to make that movie, he's going to walk away.
Yeah. I mean, that's my understanding. I mean, and I can't blame him. I mean, if he wanted to do it a specific way and was being told that that's not the way they wanted to do it, then, I can't imagine he would want to make somebody else's movie. That's not his style.
Yeah.
Well, and as John said, it could have been a great movie.
Yeah. Totally.
I love Soderbergh.
Approach.
I think he's fantastic. I love his point of view. I think he's a really great director.
Yeah, and it's fascinating too, because around this time we're looking at, this is his run from 2007 to 2010 here. Ocean's 13, Che Part 1 and 2, The Girlfriend Experience, The Informant, and then Contagion in 2011, and then Haywire. So very interesting process for him to go down, and then he does something completely different like Magic Mike. So he's in this experimental phase of filmmaking in his career. So I think his approach to Moneyball would have been, if I can say this, even more of an art house approach to sports. So it would have been a very interesting take from his point of view on this all. So you say hear about it now, go, no, they're the wrong one. They made the right decision. But you could argue Soderbergh would have gotten just as much of a quality film out of this story that Bennett Miller did.
Well, and in particular, when you're dealing with a true story, this is nonfiction. And I just read the book. You picked and chose. They picked and chose 2 hours of material to say, this is what we want to talk about. Well, there was a whole bunch of other stuff that's really interesting too, And so, that was what's so interesting to me. And, while I wish that you had stayed on to work on this whole film Moneyball, I also really liked the movie that we ended up with. So Karen, thank you so much for dropping by, coming all the way from our house
to the kitchen out to the office.
to the office. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Karen.
Thanks for having me, guys. It's always fun to be on the Cine-Files, and it's nice when I can throw in a little bit of strange lore of a thing that never happened and became something completely different. So,
and we still want to have you back sometime to do another movie.
Yes, I'm working on that. I'm going through my list of movies that I want to watch to see.
You've been doing that for years.
I know. I'm terrible. I re-listened to All the President's Men the other day, and I had so much to say about it, and it was so great. And I just don't know that there's any other movie out there that I will have that much to say about.
Do you remember the quote that you taught me that you've told me over and over again that I would like to remind you of? The perfect is the enemy of the good.
Yes, my meditation teacher. Don't let perfection be the enemy of the good. All right.
Thanks so much for coming by.
Thanks for having me. Bye.
Bye.
So Soderbergh, just as Karen has now left my office, Soderbergh has left the film.
Hey-o.
And it goes into what's called turnaround, which basically means, Hollywood limbo. And the budget gets cut from $58 million to $47 million. Brad Pitt takes a pay cut, but also becomes a producer, and they bring in another executive producer who has been in the news a lot lately, and that is Scott Rudin.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's yeah.
Do we want to get into it? I feel like we can tell our fans, Google it and see all the stuff that's happening for yet another terrible producer whose behavior is quite abhorrent. And you can read all about it in the trades and in the websites.
All I will say is that it's a very different situation from Harvey Weinstein, but it's really similar in the sense that, man, this guy had made a ton of great stuff and seems like a real asshole.
Yep. Yeah. And was allowed to run rampant because he was successful for so long.
That's the Harvey Weinstein similarity.
Yeah.
And he brings in Aaron Sorkin to work on the script. And Aaron Sorkin, he did, again with Scott Rudin, the play of To Kill a Mockingbird that I saw in New York. That's an amazing version of that play. And Aaron Sorkin said he would only do it if Steve Zalian was cool with it, because he didn't, this is a great writer, and he doesn't want to come in and step on another great writer's toes. And Zalian said, fine. And they actually worked simultaneously. So they're each doing drafts at the same time. And basically what they said was like sort of the dialogue and the humor and the irony. Well, that was coming out of Aaron Sorkin's computer, and the more deep character human stuff that was coming off of Zalian's computer. And they put it together to make this film that we see.
Yeah.
Would you like to enter the world of Moneyball?
Let's have some fun. Let's do it.
So we start this film with a quote, and the quote is, "It's unbelievable how much you don't know about the game you've been playing all your life." Mickey Mantle.
Mickey Mantle, and this is an incredible. I don't want to say this, just to be honest with everybody before we even dive too deep into it. And I should have said this before we started, Steve. This is, I remember all this happening. I watched it in real time. I was aware of this. I'm a Yankees fan, so I was always aware of other teams in the AL who were playing well. The A's had done such a good job the year before, but I always felt like these small market teams that would get these 100 wins. The regular season is fine, but it rarely led to them being successful in the postseason. It wasn't until the Diamondbacks did it, and of course the Sox to a degree did it a few years later after this film. But yeah, at the time I was like, this is a great plucky team, and it's great that they get the best out of it, and shows you the team sometimes is better than stars, but in the end, they always seem to fall short. And so I was curious to see how this movie was going to go. And using a New York Yankee Mickey Mantle quote to start the movie is so interesting, when it's going to be, in essence, mentioned quite a few times through the movie that that they're measuring themselves financially against the New York Yankees, who are always considered the top team to spend money on players.
What I really wonder about is, what's the context for that quote? Like,
good point.
Did he say it in the middle of him playing? Did he say it 20 years later? Did he, that's what I'm really curious about.
Yeah.
But we go from this quote to archival footage, October 15th, 2001. It's the postseason, as you say. And we're watching the A's play against the Yankees in the American League Elimination Game. And Jason Giambi, who's a guy we hear a lot about, scores a run on a single.
Into right center field, broken bat, it'll fall the base hit.
Then we see these numbers come up, and these numbers are key to the movie.
Yeah.
$114,457,768 versus $39,722,689. And then it fills in what these numbers mean. And that is the Yankees payroll versus the A's payroll.
So already a setup of David versus Goliath, Steve, very clearly. David versus Goliath, the underdog A's. Everybody connected to the A's are underdogs. Yeah.
And then we see in this archival footage, which, by the way, includes Rudy Giuliani. And this is Giuliani at the height of his America's Mayor.
Right. Because this is only a couple of months after September 11th. It's October 2001.
It's a month and 4 days. I mean, it's really soon. And as the game is playing, there's this guy sitting alone in the stands without the game, and he flicks on a radio. And we start to hear that the Yankees won, and he immediately switches it off. And he switches on and switches off. And that, of course, is Brad Pitt playing Billy Beane.
Superstitious galore.
Yeah. He is, and it's funny too. That's totally true. That's in the book. He really did all this stuff. He really was angry. He really did break stuff. He really didn't watch the games. That is all totally true. And gets in his car and he breaks that radio that he's been holding in his car, tosses it out the window of the car, gets out of the car, and steps on the radio. That is a great opening of a movie.
Absolutely.
And the next thing we hear is that Jason Giambi, who's basically the A's best player, their star, has been traded. And who has he been traded to? The Yankees.
Yeah, the Yankees.
And we go from there to a meeting between Billy Beane and the owner of the A's, Stephen Schott.
How the guys doing?
As a killer, it's a tough one to swallow.
They'll do better next year.
We were close, weren't we?
We were so close.
Right there.
Don't mistake it. You got to feel good about that.
I feel great about it. I feel great about it.
Which is a complete lie. And he just makes a complete turn.
We're not going to do better next year.
Just what you want to hear from your general manager.
Why not?
The thing that I really like about this movie, and maybe a holdover, Steve, from this interview we just had with Karen, maybe this whole Soderbergh realistic approach to casting and to these characters was a holdover from Soderbergh, and Bennett Miller employed it as well, because it lends an air of authenticity when you're watching an actor like Brad Pitt go toe to toe with the guy who's playing Steve Schott. And Steve Schott seems like he's the actual owner of the A's, because he's not zinging them back and forth. He's kind of stumbling through the back and forth with Brad Pitt. So it makes it feel kind of subconsciously authentic. So I thought it was kind of brilliant that they decided to go that route.
And the reason that they're not going to be better next year is that they losing their 3 top guys, including Giambi.
They'll find new guys.
I need more money, Steve.
Billy.
I need more money.
Real quick, the guy that plays Steve Schott is Bobby Kotick. And Bobby Kotick is the CEO of Activision Blizzard.
Really?
So not an actor in any way, shape, or form, but a producer, and he actually produced Skylanders Academy as well. Shout out to one of our friends. But this overall is an interesting approach too, because you get a guy who's not an actor to play a CEO as another CEO, and so it lends an authenticity to the back and forth that feels that just kind of puts you in the mood of this movie, in the mood of this organization and time as well.
Well, and I think what they do so well with the scene is that both characters make perfect sense.
Yes.
It is Brad Pitt. It is Billy Beane's job to get as much money as he can to get the best team that he can. And This guy's like, this is how much money I have.
Yeah.
I don't have 17 million for a ball player.
I'm not asking you for tens of 20, 30 million dollars. I'm just asking you for a little bit of help. Just get me a little bit closer, and I will get you that championship team.
And it's also a great window right off the bat, or a great introduction rather, into the arrogance and the self-belief that Billy Beane has in himself to go toe to toe with an owner like this and be like, come on, give me the money. I need the money. You want to win, don't you? And the owner push him back. And I'm sure Mr. Kotick has had his interactions with people going, I need more money to make this game. This is all we have. You got to do what you got to do within the construct of the budget for this game. What can I tell you? So, yeah. Well,
and I love the last moment where Billy's like, I'm not leaving here until I get more money. And there's a pause and the owner says,
what else can I help you with?
I think he's fantastic casting.
Oh, yeah, totally.
We're back with him at home and he's getting some kind of offer on the phone. He's trying to make a deal and it's supposed to be for $7 million. And then the guy changes the deal and changes it to $8 million. And Billy realizes that he is just being played. Yep. That they used him to get another team to up their bid. And there was never a chance Billy was going to get this guy.
Congratulations, asshole. You win.
Let's go to the scout meeting. I think this is like the key to the movie. And I'd be curious to hear what you think about it, because there's all these things these guys say about the players that they're scouting. And honestly, it all sounds so idiotic to me, purposely so. And part of me wonders, like, are they giving these guys? Is this really fair to what Major League Scouts are like?
Well, no, I think you've seen a lot of Major League Scouts are these lifers, man, and they're willing, and they get paid a certain amount. And the ones that do find the diamonds in the rough of the gems, sure, they get a little bit more, but not that much more. And so these guys do it, and the whole farm system knows they do it because they love it. And so they love being out there. They love traveling. And this is all they know how to do. And so this is in essence a lifetime job if you can be successful at it and just keep working well into your old age. And this is how baseball works. And the NFL is the same way. Being old in sports is not a negative when you're in the front office. People actually respect that and admire that. It's other areas where they seek youth, obviously on the field, and then sometimes in the coaching ranks. Certainly more recently in the coaching ranks, youth has been more valued than it has been in the past. And so at this time in 2011, 2002, when this is happening, think of it, this is 19 years ago. So this was pretty much the norm, having older guys who are there with their notebooks, because they're not going to do stuff on computers. They don't have their laptops, and they're writing stuff out, and they have all this dossier in essence on all these players, and they're going back and forth with Billy. But here's the point of the movie: he's not a likable protagonist. He's kind of a dick a number of times, but sometimes, and we've said this about other directors, but sometimes in real life, you got to kind of be a dick to get stuff done, because guys and people are set in their ways. And so he's trying to rattle the cage a little bit here and go like, look, we're changing things. We're changing things, and we've got to get on board with this. And these guys are naturally resisting because they're old men, Steve. And so they're set in their ways. Look, you and I are getting up there. We're set in our ways. It's just the way it works. And so you rebel against it a little bit. But it's also a great window into the fact that he's a terrible, what do they call that? His bedside manner is absolutely horrible. Awful. Horrible bedside manner.
Well, but the thing I want to ask about is that when they are discussing players, these scouts, they speak entirely in metaphor, not in numbers.
Yeah.
Good looking ball player.
Can he hit?
Yeah, he's got a beautiful swing, right, Barry?
The ball explodes off his bat. He throws the club head at the ball, and when he connects, it pops off the bat. You can hear it all over the ballpark.
A lot of pop coming off the bat.
And it's effort.
If he's a good hitter, why doesn't he hit good?
Yeah, so let me answer your question like this. It's sports, right? And it's dudes, Steve, in a room. Dudes are going to talk like this. And old dudes definitely are about the swing, about his look. Even the girlfriend thing is something I've heard other men say.
Not an ugly girlfriend.
What's that mean?
Ugly girlfriend means no confidence.
I've heard other women say about men. So this is a human thing more than it is a dude thing. This idea of like who you pick to be, who you choose to be with is kind of how you see yourself. That kind of thing. I've heard that from a number of people through my life. So that's not an unusual thing to be heard.
Yeah, he passes the eye candy test. He's got the looks. He's ready to play the part. He just needs to get some playing time.
I'm just saying, his girlfriend is a 6 at best.
It's basically laying the groundwork or putting out there the line that separates Billy Beane from these guys in the Scouts. The Scouts are very much about the eye test, what we call the eye test in sports. And General Manager, or Billy Beane rather, is trying to find a new way through this equation. You can tell he's trying to figure out the old ways only work to get me to a certain level. I need to blow past this level somehow with a new way of thinking. And he's a fool to think that he's the old men. We're going to all of a sudden embrace his new approach to things. But to me, it felt very authentic to hear these guys who are sports guys talk about things in a certain way that does default to cliche or does default to kind of like outside things rather than addressing the question directly.
Well, and this is what I think. This is why I think this scene is fundamental to the movie. And it was funny. I never answered the question about how I came to the film. Karen and I watched it at the ArcLight. It wasn't that interesting an answer. I'll tell you this right now. But, we just saw it in a movie theater, liked it a lot. Reading the book really blew my mind because and this is the thing that has really gotten me thinking is I think this is not just about baseball. I think this is about how we think about the world, is that we walk around with these preconceived notions and we trust our gut about people we meet, about our plans, about how to spend money, how to invest, political, philosophical, all these things we kind of, because that's how forever humans got around in the world. The best thing to trust was your gut. And I think this movie is challenging that idea, is that saying like, no, there's a different way to approach what we're trying to do. And the first thing is actually asking the question, like, what are we trying to do here? And you can watch Billy getting more and more frustrated throughout this scene until he finally goes, we see him like making the hand gesture, like the blah, I'm making it for John so you can see it, like the blah, blah, blah hand gesture. And someone says, Billy, is that a suggestion?
Guys are just talking. Talking la 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 like this is business as usual. It's not.
And they say, we're trying to solve the problem.
Not like this, you're not even looking at the problem.
So Grady, who's played by Ken Medlock, who was a baseball player, is a real baseball guy in addition to being an actor. He played for the Dodgers under La Russa. He says,
We're very aware of the problem.
this is going to be his main antagonist in the Scouts. This is the main guy.
Look, Billy, we all understand what the problem is. We have to replace...
Okay, good. What's the problem?
The problem is we have to replace 3 key players in our lineup.
What's the problem?
Same as it's ever been. We've got to replace these guys with what we have existing.
No, what's the problem, Barry?
And this is where you're totally right. He is condescending. He is rude. He is brusque, insulting, angry.
The problem we're trying to solve is that there are rich teams and there are poor teams. Then there's 50 feet of crap. And then there's us.
Which, by the way, the A's were not the poorest team in the league. They were, I think, second poorest.
Yeah. God forbid, second poorest.
Just saying.
Boston's taking our kidneys, Yankees taking our heart, and you guys are sitting around talking the same old good body nonsense like we're selling jeans.
And think about this, Steve. I mean, it's 2002, right? And this film is being made in 2011. Over the last 10 years, you've seen the explosion of technology becoming the predominant way of how we function in the world. Nerds becoming the dominant alpha section of the world. Do you know what I'm saying? And in 2002, this is when this transition starts to kind of happen. Right. And so you're seeing these old school guys who were probably like captain of their football teams or head of their baseball teams, guys like you talk about Grady, who's had this experience. And they're looking at this kid who's a failed athlete. We find out in the movie, a failed athlete. Guy couldn't make it in the majors as an athlete. And he wants to now upset the apple cart by defaulting to statistics. And you're all old men listening to a young guy try to tell you how to do your job. So the animosity is there just from nerd versus stats, nerd versus jock, and then also young versus old. So it's such a great way to introduce the divisions that we will be exploring in the movie. And also, like Cinderella Man, you see certain people turned into villains who weren't actually villains in real life. They were just people who had differences of opinion in this situation. But it's a movie, so you got to have a villain.
Well, this is the
thing. He's great.
He's fantastic. Yeah. Well, and this is I love Aaron Sorkin. I think he is an unbelievably good writer.
Yes.
But I don't think he cares very much about reality. And there's several movies that he wrote that are about real things that are filled with a lot of things that aren't true, that are pretty misleading. And obviously Social Network, same with the Steve Jobs movie. That's just not really real in terms of people that really know a lot about Steve Jobs. Same with the, what's the movie about Afghanistan? I should know. Charlie Wilson's War.
Charlie Wilson's War, right.
It's like, is that Aaron likes to bring in things that make things more dramatic that aren't actually what was going on. Grady being one of them that isn't that realistic. But this moment I think is great.
Is there another first baseman like Giambi?
No, not really.
No.
And if there was, could we afford him?
Nope.
Then what the fuck are you talking about, man? If we try to play like the Yankees in here, we will lose to the Yankees out there.
And I love this, right? Because this is, once again, him confronting someone telling him, let me do my job. You do your job. Let us do our job, right? And this is going to be this kind of foreshadowing the battle is going to have with Art Howe as well in the movie. That version of Art Howe in the movie. It's an interesting territorial battle that's happening behind the scenes of this club as we're watching the movie.
Well, and this is one of the things that's weird, I think. And as you point out, there's a lot of inaccuracies in the film.
Yes.
One of them is that the idea that the A's are total failures when they just lost to the Yankees in the elimination game of the playoffs.
Yeah.
The idea that this system is completely doesn't work, that doesn't make sense.
Right.
And the fact is, some of this sabermetrics and stat stuff, they had actually started in 1999. This didn't all just happen in 2002. It was a slow build. The big year is 2002, but it didn't all just happen then.
Yeah, and some of the research I did for this, Bill James' book apparently had Billy Beane had known about it since '95.
Yeah.
So this is just kind of certain things had to take their time to get there, and we're seeing it in this movie.
Well, and Bill James, for those of you who don't know, I certainly didn't know anything about him. He's a guy who started writing these essays in the mid '70s and would put out this annual baseball analytics book. And people slowly but surely started to discover him, So these ideas have been around quite a long time.
Yeah.
And speaking about things that have been around quite a long time, we cut now to the backstory, which is Billy Beane in 1979.
This sumbitch is going in the first round.
He can run, he can field, he can hit with power. And we're seeing all this interest in this high school kid. And so now we know, Billy was a player. It sounds like he's going to be a great player.
Yeah.
I love the way they handle the backstory. The way they bring it out in little pieces to fill this in.
Again, it almost feels like this is of what Karen, this is such an interesting way to look at this film now after Karen's interview, this idea of, once again, you're hearing voiceovers that are essentially simulating scenes from the past, and you're watching the action with the voiceovers accompanying it. So maybe this is part of Steven Zahn's script that he had written with under Soderbergh's direction before Soderbergh left the project. So some of the remnants are here in the backstory of Billy Beane.
Well, that's where it's funny, having developed projects, and in particular having developed projects that never actually got made. The amount of changes you go through. Like, there was one project I was doing with Hoover that was being a reality show, and we must have gone through 30 different versions. And at one point Discovery was interested, and then National Geographic was interested, and then we were trying to pitch it to PBS, and then we were trying to take it to Fox. And at each time they asked us to change it in certain ways. And then they passed, and then we went to the next place, but we still had the changes from the previous place. And it was like, well, do we go back to the original thing? And then it's like, someone would ask, well, we'd rather it would be more like this. And then we'd go well, funny you should mention, here's a version of it where it's like that. And it's a certain point, Hoover and I are looking at each other going, I don't even know what the show is. We've been trying to sell it for so long. It's become so many different things.
Hey, Billy. Hey, Mark. Good to see you, man. Too. Please, sit down.
And we're having a meeting that is about some kind of a trade. And we're in with the general manager of Cleveland. And there's a bunch of guys who we are front office guys. And among those bunch of guys is Jonah Hill, who is Peter Brand. So this is based on the character Paul DePodesta. And when Karen was working on the film, the character in the movie was named Paul DePodesta. And the person that they, I believe, had almost signed a deal with was Dimitri Martin to play him.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then when the new script changes came in, Paul DePodesta said, I'd like you to take my name off of it.
Yeah.
Because this doesn't really represent who I am. And it sounds like that's absolutely right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, because the way the guy is played by Jonah Hill is not how this guy actually was.
Yeah.
First of all, he graduated from Harvard. Second of all, the guy was in great shape.
Yeah.
Second of all, the guy was a former athlete and been a lifetime baseball person, like had been eventually transitioned in the front office and was doing. So he wasn't a nerdy, schlubby guy who's slightly overweight, who was like, not being listened to by anybody. It's a completely different characterization. So, I mean, I think DePodesta had every right to be like, this isn't me, Pally.
Yeah.
You can put some remnants of me in here, but this isn't me for sure.
Well, and a serious athlete too, we should say, is that he played baseball and football for Harvard. Now, Harvard's not like playing football for Alabama or something, but it's still, playing serious ball. He was a real athlete.
Yeah, he'd been a scout, a GM, an executive,
And they start trying to negotiate something, and Jonah Hill, Peter Brand, is listening to all this, and he makes a offer. And Jonah Hill whispers something to another guy who whispers something to the Cleveland general manager.
I think it's going to be a hard no on Garcia.
So here's what doesn't make sense to me about this.
Okay.
Is that the implication is that Jonah Hill's got these ideas.
Yeah.
Or Peter Brand has got these ideas, but nobody's listening.
Mm-hmm.
And yet what we just saw was that they're totally listening to him.
Right.
Which is a little bit of a weird contradiction.
Well, they're listening to him about the smaller players.
Yeah.
They're not going to listen to him about the big players. And so that's where you make your bones. And so for him in this moment, it's just like the smaller transactions. That's all they're allowing him to kind of talk about.
And we have Billy Beane in the cubicles looking around for this guy because he noticed him in the room.
Yeah.
And he comes right. And what's so funny is Peter Brand notices Billy Beane looking for him. He's kind of not wanting to be seen, and comes up, goes right into his cubicle, sits down on the desk and says, "Hello."
Who are you?
I'm Peter Brand.
What do you do?
Mostly player analysis right now.
First job in baseball?
It's my first job anywhere.
And I love the next question. Whose nephew are you? Because Billy thinks the only reason that this young guy is being listened to is because he must be connected somehow.
Who are you?
I'm Peter Brand.
I don't give a rat's ass what your name is. What happened in there?
Billy realizes he's got to take him somewhere else, so he gestures. They walk away. They're in the garage. I think this scene is great.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's very clear that Peter has had this speech in his head and has been waiting for someone to ask him the question.
Yeah.
There is an epidemic failure within the game to understand what is really happening. And this leads people who run Major League Baseball teams to misjudge their players and mismanage their teams.
And then he apologizes because he feels like he's speaking disrespectfully.
I apologize.
To him about him managing his team. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Because and I get it. He's a young guy talking to the general manager of a team that just made it to the playoffs.
People who run ball clubs, they think in terms of buying players. Your goal shouldn't be to buy players. Your goal should be to buy wins. And in order to buy wins, you need to buy runs. Baseball thinking is medieval. They are asking all the wrong questions. And if I say it to anybody, I'm ostracized.
Billy is loving this because this is the antithesis of the scene he just had with the scouts. Because he's going, we can't do things the same way. The scouts are going, this is how we always do it. And here's a guy saying, we can't do things the same way. Everybody's thinking is medieval.
I love the scene because he's also, and then the scene ends. He's like, okay, Yale economics, baseball, and then just walks off. So there's no resolution to the scene in Jonah Hill's favor, at least at this point, or Peter Brand's favor, at least at this point. But I like the interaction. Once again, it's to lay the groundwork here. The statistics is the approach to baseball, and I love it. I think the film is so revolutionary in portraying this. Do they take some liberties? Sure. But I love that they put this out on the table because this was a massive debate. I mean, sports talk was consumed with this when it was happening in the early 2000s. And the Red Sox winning the series 2 years later kind of put it to bed as that it was a positive change in baseball. But at the time, it was very much a frustrating situation and people were super upset. And because sports people, no matter what you want to say or how much we've advanced, sports people are jocks. Sports people are fans. And for them, you start to bring in, well, if you carry the 1 and do the Pythagorean theorem, like they get pissed off. Like, no, I know who's fucking good and I know who's not fucking good. I don't care what's on your paper. And fans always think it's inherent within fandom. I know who the best player for us is. I know who you should be starting, who should be sitting on the bench, who should be coaching the team, general managing the team, owning the team. We think we know just from our eyes. We think we know who's best, And so this whole statistics thing was a revolution.
Well, and it's less fun,
Yeah, right. Yes, exactly. It strips away and it makes it on the paper, which is super frustrating because people aren't mathematically inclined for the most part, Steve. So it's so frustrating. Statistics is a tough study.
Well, I'll put it another way too, is that statistically, if you get a player on first base, it doesn't matter how you got him there. Yeah. The value of a player on first is the same.
Yes.
But if you get a player on first base that makes just the perfect base hit in the pocket, or versus a player that walks to first, which one gets the crowd to cheer?
Exactly.
Is that the walk is boring. The base hit is exciting. Is that an out is an out. But if someone makes a spectacular diving catch, you're like, oh my God, that guy is amazing.
Right.
But what is the value of the out? Well, the value of the out's the same. We work emotionally. That's what humans do. That's how we operate. And it's funny too, because the fact that he's an economics guy from Yale makes perfect sense because there is a direct connection between so-called Moneyball or Sabermetrics, which is the Bill James name for it, and the stock market. Is that it's based on a lot of the logic that came out in terms of and this is stuff I'm not an expert on in any way, but in terms of how they figured out derivatives and all of these games that people started to play in the 70s that led to, the financial crash and a whole bunch of other stuff. It started with breaking things down into tinier and tinier statistics because we didn't have computers that could handle this stuff. As you start to have computers that can do all this math really fast, you can look at things in a way more granular way. And so what Bill James started to do was to take some of that statistics power and put it in a way that had not been done before. One other quick thing about the financial market, just because is that, and this has had a lot of discussion today, is basically most of financial advice is bullshit. What they have found is that there can be totally some advisor, stock market, investment consultant, whatever, who has an amazing run and totally beats the market. But over time, they actually largely don't. Yeah. And so, because then they'll have a really bad year where they'll lose to the market because they're betting more aggressively and because they think they know what's going to happen. And in fact, nobody can predict what's going to happen. And so there's like if you were going to hire an investment consultant, John, you would pay them a certain amount of your total investment, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's say you pay them 1%. Well, then therefore they have to at least beat the market by 1% to make it worth your while. And what it looks like is that over time, they'll probably do 0.9% better than the market, which means you're losing, a percentage or two every year rather than just invest in an index. So there's all this money flowing away from financial advisors today. And just invest in the S&P 500, you'll do better over time.
Yeah.
Because we're not as smart as we think we are.
No. I hope that applies to crypto. So.
Oh, crypto is what, man, we're going to see. There's going to be a lot of, but people are a lot of money is going to move around.
Yeah. I'd like to apologize to every person who told me to invest in crypto 5 years ago. You were absolutely right, and I was wrong to laugh at you. And I can't tell you, when I read these stories, I kick myself in the ass before not having invested even the little amount that I had just to see where it would go.
But you could just as easily have gotten screwed.
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely. You're absolutely right.
There's a book, we're way off topic at the moment, but there's a book called Nickel and Dimed.
Yeah.
Is that what it's called? No.
Nickel and Dime?
Oh, okay. It's not called that. It's called... Hey guys, it's Steve jumping in just for a second because you know how much I hate it when I can't remember something. The book I couldn't remember is called Pound Foolish by Helene Olin. It's a 2012 book about the myths of the personal finance industry, and it is really worth your time. There's that whole, for the price of a latte every week, you could become a millionaire in 10 years. That's, first of all, the math is all wrong and that's bullshit. But the big thing about it is that part of the key to being successful as an investor is having enough money that you don't have to touch it in the bad times.
Right.
Because if you just put your money in like an S&P 500 index and you just let it sit there, it would go up, you know, over and over and over again. But there would be times like 2008 or times like a year ago where it'll crash.
Right.
And if you need the money when it crashes, like let's say you have a car accident and you got to get a new car, you have a medical expense or you have a business expense or, you know, if you have to take your money out when it's low, you're fucked.
Yeah.
And so people, it's very, very hard for people to get over the level necessary in order to start building up wealth. It's really, once you get there, that's why rich people just keep getting richer because they don't have to take the money out. Right. You know, they can afford to weather the storm. And not only can they afford to weather the storm, they take advantage of it because the market goes down and they buy up a bunch of stuff. You know, that's why the rich got way richer in the last year because interest rates were so low that even though, you know, most of America was really struggling, there were a bunch of people who were like buying houses and investing in the stock market and getting richer and richer and richer because they could weather the storm.
Right.
You know,
good point.
Yeah. But we digress. And we go back in time again to hear more about this potential superstar, Billy Beane.
Very rare do you come upon a young man like Billy who can run, who can field, who can throw, who can hit, and who can hit with power.
And they go, you know, he's got to make a choice. If he wants to be center fielder for the Mets, here's the check.
Yeah.
This is a big decision in the book as well. And it was like a real close thing. He was real close to just going to Stanford and he didn't. He took the check.
Hey, it's Billy Beane. You drafted me in the first round.
Because he got drafted in the first round.
By the Mets,
along with Darryl Strawberry.
After I left, you looked me up in your computer.
I did, yeah. You were a good player.
Cut the crap, man. Would you have drafted me in the first round?
I'd have taken you in the 9th round. No signing bonus.
Pack your bags, Pete. I just bought you from the Cleveland Indians.
It's a great scene. It tests. Do you know what I'm saying? It tests this guy, how loyal this guy's going to be and how honest this guy's going to be with him. So,
and by the way, having looked a little bit at Billy Beane's career, he wasn't a terrible player.
No, he wasn't a terrible player, but when you're pitched, Steve, at 5'2", you think you're going to be a superstar. Yeah. And when your mind thinks that possibility is out there and you don't reach that possibility, it really messes with your confidence.
Yeah. I mean, he's in the majors for like 6 or 7 years. I mean, that's a real career, but it's exactly right. It's against his expectations. Pete shows up at the Coliseum. By the way, a lot of it was shot at the Coliseum and shot at Dodger Stadium, kind of pretending to be the Coliseum.
Gotcha.
It's so funny, by the way, being a Bay Area guy and having seen games at the Oakland Coliseum. And in particular, like there's these shots of the bridge that people walk over to get into the stadium. That bridge comes from the BART station, which is the subway system in the Bay Area. And it is the same BART station that if you fly into the Oakland airport, which I did all the time, you go to that BART station. So I've been right at that bridge dozens of times, not going to games, but just because I would fly into Oakland a lot.
Right on.
And Peter got in there early and hands him some papers and says, I wanted you to see the players' evaluations.
I asked you to do 3.
Yeah.
How many did you do?
47.
Okay.
Actually, 51. I don't know why I lied just then.
By the way, I have no way of knowing, but that's an Aaron Sorkin line.
Yeah, it seems like,
That's totally Sorkin.
People are overlooked for a variety of biased reasons and perceived flaws. Age, appearance, personality. Billy, of the 20,000 notable players for us to consider, I believe that there is a championship team of 25 people that we could afford because everyone else in baseball undervalues them.
And we hear the term the island of misfit toys. And this is the first time we see like Chad Bradford, who's this relief pitcher that nobody wants. He says he's the most undervalued player in baseball because he throws funny, because he's what you call a submariner. Again, I think this is a profound idea because we often don't think about our goal. We think so like here, and don't want to make this political in any way, but I'm going to say is that if you think about our political arguments, Like, let's say the healthcare argument, like you and I being liberal guys, we want some kind of national healthcare system. And people on the other side want a system that they believe the private industry could be better. But in fact, that is not what you and I want, and that is not what they want. We actually all want the same thing. We want the best possible healthcare delivered to the most people for the least money.
Yep.
So if someone said to you and proved it, John, there's a privatized healthcare system that would deliver that, I think, and they proved that that was true, we would go, sure.
Yeah.
And if we could really prove our system, they would go, sure. But instead, what we normally are doing is we're fighting for our idea of what we want, and they're fighting for their idea of what they want. And so, and this is politics throughout. How do I win? Not how do I get the goal?
Yeah.
It's, I want more cops on the street. I want fewer cops on the street. No, we all want to lower crime. You know, we actually all want the same thing.
Right.
You know, and so this whole thing is like, no, it doesn't matter what they look like. It doesn't, what the goal is to get this many runs and allow this many runs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's meet Philip Seymour Hoffman. The last movie we saw him in was Punch Drunk Love.
Yeah.
Which was, what was that, 2007, I think?
Yes, I think so.
So this is like, 4 years later. I think, and the first movie we ever saw Philip Seymour Hoffman in was Boogie Nights.
Yeah.
And we've also seen him in The Big Lebowski. Those maybe there are other movies we've done on the Cine-Files with him. I'm not sure. But if you look at those movies, it should prove to you why this guy is one of the great actors of all time.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Because they're unrecognized, even though he's always Philip Seymour Hoffman. These characters are so different.
Yeah, and he's such a character actor who occasionally is at least one of those guys that is a character actor who's occasionally a lead. And I wonder, because Bennett Miller had kind of, directed him to an Oscar, I wonder if Bennett was like, hey, would you step into this role and play this part? Because like I said earlier, he looks nothing like Art Howe, whereas I could argue Billy Beane, a lot of people have argued he's even more attractive than Brad Pitt, if that's possible. So this is such an interesting choice, but he brings the right amount of rebelliousness or defensiveness and confidence in what he's doing to push back against Billy Beane. Plus, he's such a physical counter to Billy Beane as well. So it makes it a very interesting battle that's happening, not just visually, but also in your mind, in the back of your mind as you're watching this on subconscious levels.
He is so sad to be around. He's such an Eeyore. You know what I mean?
Well, he has to. Yeah.
I mean, he's so put upon in every moment. And he is the most poorly treated character in this film.
Absolutely. Absolutely. He's the Max Baer of this film. Max Baer as Cinderella Man is not as bad as they portrayed him in that movie. And Art Howe is not as bad as he's portrayed in this movie. And he has spent the last 10 years telling anyone who will listen in interviews and what have you, that this was an unfair treatment, unfair portrayal. And a lot of people have come out to defend him as well, who've worked with him or played for him, saying this is unfair portrayal. And watching it this time, I felt more sympathy for Art Howe for sure, because he's right. Essentially, Billy Beane wants to manage the team without managing the team. And that's a tough thing when you hire a manager and you want him to do you want him to bring you success. You can pick up all the players you want, but like this idea that you're going to tell him where to put the players and when to play the players, just fucking manage the team while you're at it. Then, what am I here? I'm just a go-between. And what person worth his pride wants to be that?
Well, this is one of the questions I wanted to ask you. So in the book, it basically says, we all think that managers manage the team, but really the decisions are made by the general manager. That sounds totally wrong to me. What do you think?
It's not true. It's because nothing is an absolute in sports. In some situations, you have a coach and a GM who's the same person. Bill Parcells, notorious for that. Greg Popovich with the Spurs. You have these coaches who are general managers, because Bill Parcells once said very famously in a press conference, it doesn't make sense to me to ask me to cook the dinner if you're not going to let me buy the groceries too. Right. So it's that kind of thing. So you see the logic, but it's rare when a GM who is also the manager of the team succeeds, because both jobs take so much time and effort in your day and in your season that it is the rare person who can balance both, you know? And so to me, I think it's always a case by case basis. In some situations, general managers hire coaches they know who worship at their feet, and so they'll do whatever they tell them to do. And then there are other situations where GMs come in and they haven't selected the coach, and it causes friction because both sides are trying to impose their will on the team so they can get credit for the success of that team. So it's not an absolute. It's very much a fluid situation depending on the team and the league.
One of the things the book and the movie are trying to do is say, this is right, you know, and I think there is an amazing truth here that is worth looking at, but I don't think it's the only truth or the absolute truth. Like the way they talk about players is that players are a bunch of statistics, and that those stats are static, that they don't change, you know, like, no, this guy with a sweet swing where the ball pops off the bat, he can't learn to be a big league hitter. He is what he is. And that's not true. Like, people do change. Coaches do matter. You know, you know, you hear all the time about a player who ups their batting average by this many percent by adjusting their swing in this way. Well, that's not a general manager thing, you know?
Right. That's a coaching thing. Absolutely. That's a
coaching thing.
Yeah.
But this, and the thing is, again, I'm with you. I really felt for Art Howe watching it this time. And this scene of, like, he's on a 1-year contract and Billy was not going to give him a better contract. And he's like, I just won 102 games last season.
Yeah.
You know,
and he says to him, a 1-year contract means to a manager just what it means to a player. And Billy, you know what that means, in essence, knowing Billy's career as well. And so, you know, and the way Billy even treats him, like, you know, kind of in the middle of something here, Art, I'm the fucking manager of the team, guy. Like, you can't make time for me for a couple of minutes here to have this conversation. And of course, in reality, this conversation never happened. He was on a 2-year contract through 2003 with the option of another year being picked up. So Art Howe says the conversation never happened, and that his agent has always handled his contracts, and he would never talk to a GM about his contract. So
yeah, I mean, well, and this is it's dramatic. Yeah, you know, in terms of a movie. Well, and to your point from a while ago is that I do think Billy Beane is right about a lot of things, but he's an asshole.
Yes.
You know,
terrible bedside manner. Yep.
Terrible. And we're about to see him continue to be terrible in the next scene because we're back in with our scouts. He says, you're trying to replace Giambi. We can't do it.
Now, what we might be able to do is recreate him. Recreate him in the aggregate.
And right there, that's a word that I probably didn't come up a lot in scouting meetings. And he goes over on-base percentage. This is the big stat. And I think what they really did was it was combining slugging and on-base percentage. So it's on-base plus slugging. And he goes over each of the players and what they did in terms of their stats. And he goes, and add that up and you get, and he snaps his fingers and points at Jonah Hill.
You want me to speak?
When I point at you, yeah.
And it's a bit. Again, I bet it's Sorkin. Yeah. This is a Sorkin kind of bit. Yeah. And we got a bunch of snaps.
Billy.
Yeah.
Who's that?
That's Pete.
Does Pete really need to be here? Yes, he does. And now they go over who they want. And one of them is Jason Giambi's little brother, Jeremy.
Yeah.
And he has the little magnetic name tag, which he tosses up on the board behind him, which I think is a great little bit of physical stuff.
Yeah.
And they go over what that guy's problems are, which is strip clubs and Vegas and weed.
Well, his on-base percentage is all we're looking at now. And Jeremy gets on base an awful lot for a guy who only costs $285,000.
And number 2, David Justice.
Not a good idea, Billy.
Old man Justice.
Yeah, he was a good player, but good for Atlanta as well, and for the Yankees. And of course, for those of you who know a little bit about gossip, he's also Halle Berry's ex-husband or boyfriend, and there were a lot of accusations of physical assault from David Justice on Halle Berry. So, so just something to throw into the mix of looking at this person as well.
His legs are gone.
Grady.
We'll be lucky to get 60 games out of him. Why do you like him?
Because he gets on base.
And then Scott Hatterberg, which they go which is they wouldn't. The guy'd been in the majors for a while. as a catcher, they would know who he was.
I know Boston wants to cut him and no one wants to pick him up.
That's good for us. He's cheap.
Are the scouts pleased with these possible players?
No, not even a little bit. Yeah.
They're getting pissed off. And of course, the most pissed off guy is Grady. And I think this actor is great in this role.
Yeah.
Look, that's all fine and well, but we've been working our asses off for the last 6.5 weeks to make this ball club better, and you're shitting all over
Brady,
it.
this is not a discussion. This is the new direction of the Oakland A's. We are card counters at the blackjack table, and we're going to turn the odds on the casino.
And then one of the coaches, Ron Washington, says, you're forgetting one thing. None of these guys knows how to play first base.
Well, you're going to have to teach one of them. Teach? Which one?
And again, it's perfect storytelling in the cut. We cut to Little League photos and Chris Pratt. Mm-hmm. I'd totally forgotten he was in this movie.
Yeah.
And it's because I didn't really know him. I didn't watch Parks and Rec. I didn't really know who he was until Guardians of the Galaxy.
Oh, so you hadn't watched Parks and Rec? Okay, yeah, got it.
He lost 30 pounds for this movie because they had said he was too fat. And he gets a call from Billy Beane. He's really funny in this movie.
Oh, yeah.
Hello?
Scott,
Yes.
it's Billy Beane of the Oakland A's.
Yes.
Can we talk?
Yeah.
You want to let us in?
Pardon me?
We're out front.
He goes in.
Yeah.
He says,
how's the elbow, Scott?
You know, it's good. It's really good. It's great. I can't throw the ball.
Billy goes, yeah, you've thrown your last ball from behind the plate. Good news is we want you at first. Guy's never played first base in his life.
Yeah.
And he's sitting there with Ron Washington. And Chris says, the thing is,
You don't know how to play first base.
That's right.
It's not that hard, Scott. Tell him, Wash.
It's incredibly hard.
It's incredibly hard.
Hey, anything worth doing is. And we're going to teach you.
Then this question, I think, is another key thing. He says, what about the fans? Because the fans are going to hate him.
Yeah.
He's replacing the A's best player. He's never played first base. They're going to hate him. And it's like, and for Billy, that doesn't matter.
This is a contract to play ball for the Oakland A's. Copy's been sent over to your agent. Discuss with your wife. Let us know.
I'm a big fan of not listening to the fans about what to do. I love that part of the Billy Beane approach to it because you've got to be authentically you. What is you? And this is Billy. As much of a dick as he is, I like that. I like that he's very clear about what he thinks works because in the end, it's his ass on the line, you know? And so when it comes to sports, I'm a very big fan of not listening to what the fans tell you to do or ask you to do or try to intimidate you to do because they won't get fired. You will. So I like that he said that. And later on, when him and Peter Brandt are having that moment after everything's falling apart, and he says to him, like, you know, are you in this thing or not? Because you can't say, well, I don't know how to explain these moves away. You can't even have that thought. You got to be committed to what we're doing here. So it may not be the best way to approach things, but I like it. You know?
I couldn't agree more. I think in the end, you got to be, you know, this is true for artists as well. You know, like you're not, yes, we care what people think. Yes, we want people to like our work, but people, they can't dictate to you or to me who we are.
Right.
You know,
right. Yeah,
like
you're the artist. Yeah.
And the biggest thing is that if you really are going to believe in statistics, well, the fans have literally nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
You know,
I will bring up something, Steve, real quick. And if you allow me a little Schmodown segue, this year in the Schmodown, we essentially on the Finstock Exchange, our faction, are using a Moneyball approach to the Schmodown. We went out with me and Tom Finstock, our manager. We got together in the offseason and we said, we're going to keep Craig the Barbarian. He's our scout. And Craig went out and found like 80 players that had submitted to be part of the league. And he interviewed them and then he quizzed them with particular set of questions that we all spoke about and approved that were for whatever league the player wanted to be a part of. Star Wars, Inner Geekdom, regular, teams, singles. And from that, we collected a dossier that was about 90 pages long. of all the people. And then from there, we selected the ones we liked and then interviewed them. And then we had a draft board because there was an actual draft, a real draft. We weren't assigned players. We actually drafted our players, and we chose out of the 10 players on the team. I think that's how many we have. We chose 6 rookies, 1 sophomore, and then the 3 veterans to be and people lost their minds. They made fun of us. They went on all these shows talking about how they didn't know who these players are. The 2 people who were supposed to analyze it, who were selected by the Schmodown, by Christian, the Schmodown Rundown guys, they were like tossing up their papers, not knowing who the hell these players were that we selected. And right now, we're in second place with 800 winning percentage.
Wow.
Because we have moneyballed the fuck out of this thing, and we've trained everybody since the beginning, since we selected them. We have been on them on one long Twitter thread, having multiple matches, multiple study sessions, multiple approaches to the game, all this kind of stuff. And it was kind of our way to kind of completely upset the apple cart. Everyone else was selecting former star players or former players who were great. We knew with me, with Craig, with JT, and with Tom, if we could line up the right crew of players who believed in our system, that we could be successful. No one anticipated, even us, how successful we've been so far. It is only June, but damn, we've done an incredible job to keep pace. And we have the top team has a 500-600 winning percentage, but they got more points because they're playing in championships because they're a top AV team. Our team is slowly building piece by piece. So when I was watching the movie today in preparation for for the podcast, I was just blown away at how we had done this approach without knowing we were doing this approach. Do you know what I'm saying? And so I feel a certain sense of pride in that. So I just wanted to kind of have a moment here to say that.
I think it's fascinating, and B, it made something click in my brain, which is every once in a while it's come up the idea of, Steve, are you ever going to be on the Schmodown or anything like that? And I've never been that into the idea, and I finally put my finger on why. I think I would be the Billy Beane, which is, I think, you look at me, it's like, oh, the guy knows a lot about movies, he's smart, he's got a lot of knowledge. I don't think I would deliver that well on the Schmodown.
You mean gameplay during gameplay?
Like on paper, it might look like I would be really good at it, but I'm actually not that good at names and dates. I mean, there are so many times in this episode that I have gone, wait, what was that guy's name? And we've looked it up. Now, I'm going to cut that out so that you don't hear it over and over again. But I actually can't. I'm really good at stories. Like I can tell, I can remember from episodes we did 3 years ago, the production story about how something happened. But I can't remember the names or the dates or like the trivia, the facts. I'm actually not that good at it, you know? So I might look good on paper, but I wouldn't be good in the game, Exactly. Let's go meet his ex-wife, Robin Wright. I think this scene is amazingly, wonderfully awkward.
Yeah. And I totally forgot she was in this movie. I knew Chris Pratt. I forgot Robin Wright was in this movie.
And I love that the house, he goes to this house that's obviously, these people got a lot of money.
Yeah.
And talks to the new husband, and you can see him really trying to be nice.
I haven't got to see you since the playoffs, and I really wanted to say that New York was heartbreaking.
I think the new husband is scared of Billy Beane.
Oh, yeah, of course. He's intimidated by him. Yeah.
Because he's a dick, and he's got a temper, and he's difficult, and
plus he's extremely good looking, and that intimidates a lot of people, Steve.
And then we hear, the daughter's not quite there, but he called her on her cell phone, and she's coming up the hill.
She's got a cell phone?
Yeah.
A 12-year-old.
For emergencies.
Big parenting decision.
Which is just such a dig. There's so much of Billy that's about kind of dominance and intimidation and anger. And by the way, I actually think this is one of Brad Pitt's best performances.
1,000%. I think he was nominated for this, or people want. He was. And so it is a fantastic performance. You're absolutely right. Because he makes you actually like or care about a guy who's kind of a dick. So it does a really good job of that.
Yeah, and you could see what he's doing so well is frequently without doing that much. You see all the inner turmoil and anger and stress that he's under. Mm-hmm. It's a very sweet scene with his daughter in a guitar store, and he gets her to sing. It's lovely.
Yeah, it's such a great song, such a cute little song.
Yeah.
It reminded me so much of the Juno song, so it had like nice little vibe to it as well.
Yeah. It's just great. It's lovely. Mm-hmm. And then we're back in the flashback, and it's 84. We're at a Mets game, and and he's up to bat. And this is a guy that never failed at anything. He could have gone to the NFL. And what does he do? He strikes out. Mm-hmm. And I love that as he's walking back to the dugout, the player he walks by is Darryl Strawberry.
Right.
There's not an organization in baseball who would not have taken a chance on this young guy.
One of the things, and this is what Billy Beane, the real Billy Beane, said, is that the biggest key for him was he didn't want to hire himself.
Yeah.
The player that looked good, but maybe wasn't that good.
I will say this, the casting of the young Billy Beane.
Amazing.
Right. But a part of me was like, but this guy is not as good looking as Brad Pitt. And so I think that's an element of this. And I'm not judging the guy. Like if he, by some random chance, if he's listening to this episode, I'm not judging your looks.
Very attractive man.
Yeah, quite. But I'm just saying it doesn't have that same energy. Like if we're to believe what Billy Beane was and how he looked and all of that, I was surprised they chose this. And initially I was going to be like, this is bad casting. But then as I thought about it more in my mind, I'm like, no, this is actually smart casting because this kid is sympathetic. Yeah. This kid is struggling. This kid has had the potential, made a decision. It's not working out for him. How many of us have universally experienced this where we make a decision in our lives and then as it's going forward, like, damn it, this is not working out the way I thought it was going to, how frustrating that is, how angry you might get. And especially when it's in public view, like the Major League Baseball is. And so how that might affect you. So choosing a kid like this, it makes you more sympathetic for the Brad Pitt version of Billy Beane as we go back to the modern scenes that we're going to see in the movie. So very smart casting in the end is what I thought.
I think that's 100% true.
Billy, that is Kevin Euclid. That is the Greek god of walks.
Kevin Euclid, one of my favorite players.
And then he gets called in the hall to talk to Grady.
It's a very well directed scene. And I'll tell you why. Because I watch it, from an actor's point of view. Grady says, hey, do you have a minute? Yeah, sure. And you can tell Brad Pitt or Billy Beane is caught up in whatever he's looking on screen because he's just been ignoring Peter. Peter's been talking about this, but he's just been he even asks him, are you okay? What's wrong? He doesn't respond to him. He's lost in his own thoughts about the situation and probably even questioning whether he's doing the right thing. Listen, don't be fooled by the movies. When people make bold decisions, there are numerous moments as human beings where they're alone at 3 a.m. and they're like, is this all going to blow up in my face? No matter what they show you outwardly, most people who are revolutionizing something, or as the character playing John Henry says later on in the movie, most people, the first person through the wall is always the bloodiest. And so there's a lot of questions through that process. And I think in that moment, he's caught up in that, right? So here's Grady coming in to kind of rattle him out of that moment, to talk to him. And Brad Pitt does such an incredible thing because the character plays great. I don't know if this is on purpose, and I don't know if they talked about it. I had, directors sometimes will give actors different direction in a scene to see how they play off of each other and not tell the other actor what the other actor is going to do. So Brad Pitt, when Grady walks out, he does what you would think. He says, can I talk to you for a minute? Grady walks away from Peter and wants to go to a separate area. It's like a private conversation. And that's natural. But sure. Billy Beane, when he steps out, Brad Pitt, he steps for a second, sees that Grady is going to dictate where they talk, and he gets this look over his face like, cocky son of a bitch. And he walks forward. So it is already like, that's his mindset going into this conversation, that Grady is trying to, in essence, strong harm him and disrespect him as an older man to a younger man. So that's all playing. And Brad Pitt does such an excellent job of showing that in the face before he moves, right? Then they have this interaction. And in this interaction, which ends with Grady physically touching him in a way that is kind of shocking in the moment, this actor goes toe to toe with Brad Pitt, and it is fantastic. And he symbolizes the general division here. It is not 100% correct. It's the general division here that the jocks versus the nerds. This is Revenge of the Nerds all over again, Steve. It's the jocks who say, hey, you tell Google boy, they're going to make fun of you because you're disrespecting the foundation of baseball. And him saying like anybody could do it, as if anybody can do science, is phenomenally nuts, And so he's approaching it from a more of a Neanderthal point of view. And you sympathize with Grady, of course, because Grady's also trying to tell him like, hey, why don't you have a little bit of fucking care about how you're doing this and how it's going to look for the organization as well, not just you.
Billy, you got a kid in there that's got a degree in economics from Yale. You got a scout here with 29 years of baseball experience. You're listening to the wrong one. You're discounting what scouts have done for 150 years, even yourself?
Adapt or die.
But the truth is, there were a lot of great players on the roster already before he started doing this. This only kind of supplemented what was already there. So it wasn't full sabermetrics up and down the roster. But they had to lay out the general division here so you can turn Billy Beane into the protagonist of this story, in essence, the hero of the story as well. So it's an essential scene to the movie.
You said so much there that I want to comment on. And the first thing is that I don't think these are black and white issues. I think there are times where you see something special in a player that needs to be developed. And if they are paired with the right coach in the right circumstances, that they'll blossom. Maybe there was a way for Billy Beane to blossom, that we just didn't get. I also think Billy Beane, as we said many times, in his characterization in this film is such a dick. And he's such a bad leader. Because he starts from a position of, you guys are useless. And even not just that I think you're useless in a condescending way, but I am angry at your uselessness. And so that's not a person anybody wants to work for. He could have gone, hey, I know you guys have 150 years of experience together in this room. I know, and we're going to try something different this year. And I want to talk to you about it and explain the process and see if we can get all on the same team. He could have done that, but he doesn't do that. And the most interesting moment at the end of the scene is he says,
this is about you and your shit, isn't it? 20 years ago, some scout got it wrong.
Whoa. Okay.
Now you're going to declare war on the whole system.
Which I think is 100% correct. There is a direct connection between him talking about being in the room, sitting at the kitchen table with Grady, and his own experience sitting at that kitchen table.
Okay, my turn.
By the way, there's so many Brad Pitt gesture moments that are just only Brad Pitt does that kind of thing.
You're so right, Steve. Yeah.
You don't have a crystal ball. You can't look at a kid and predict his future any more than I can. I've sat at those kitchen tables with you and listened to you tell those parents, when I know, I know. And when it comes to your son, I know. And you don't.
Steve, it's so reminiscent of the scene in Seven when he's talking to Kevin Spacey. You're a fucking t-shirt. You're a fucking movie of the week. It's the back and forth. Of course, he's in the better position, but you can sense the Brad Pitt mannerisms and the speech patterns, right? So you're so right to point that out, man.
And Grady's like, look, no one's going to hire you after this. You got a kid and you're going to have to explain to your kid why you're working at Dick's Sporting Goods.
As if that's the fall. I don't know any former GMs of baseball who are working at Dick's Sporting Goods. Like there's a number of ladders before, or a number of steps before you fall to Dick's Sporting Goods. By the way, a respectable job, but to anybody who works at Dick's Sporting Goods, a job is a job,
And then he says, but I'm not going to fire you, Grady. And Grady puts his hand on his shoulder and knocks that hand off.
Fuck you, Billy. Now I will.
That's a great, great moment in the scene.
Yeah, agreed.
And then who does he walk by as Grady storming out but Hard Howe? By the way, Grady wasn't fired by Billy Beane.
Nope.
He stayed on for a couple of years and he appreciated Sabermetrics.
Yes, he did. He eventually appreciated it. I think he moved on to the Twins after his time with the A's.
Just you and me, Pete. We're all in.
Before he goes to Peter, he goes to some random room, points to a guy who's playing on a video game, playing a video game. And he says, you ever done any scouting? He's like, I think a little bit on the side. Okay, you're my new head scout. And then walks back into the room with Peter. So a little bit of an irresponsible move by Billy Beane, I suppose.
It's so disrespectful.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. Well, it's funny. So there's a story that Robert Rodriguez tells in his book, Rebel Without a Crew, which is, if you're an aspiring filmmaker and think about making independent films, this is required reading.
Absolutely.
And this is the story he tells. He's sitting with his mom, and it's like Easter, and his mom is making a ham for Easter. And she takes the ham and she cuts the two ends of the ham off and then puts it in the thing and puts it in the oven. And Robert Rodriguez goes, Mom, why do you do that? Why do you cut the ends off the ham? And she goes, I don't know. My mom always did it, so I do it. And Robert Rodriguez's grandmother is still alive, so he goes to his grandmother and says, Grandma, why do you cut the ends off the ham when you put it in the oven? And she goes, I don't know. My mom always did it. And guess what? His great-grandmother is still alive. So he goes to his great-grandmother and says, Great-grandmother, why do you cut the ends off the ham? And she says, well, when I had that small apartment, the pan we had was too small, so I always had to cut the ends off the ham to fit in it. And so this thing that everybody did, they did this thing, but didn't know the reason they were doing it. And that is Robert Rodriguez's metaphor for the film industry. And there's a lot of truth. It is a very wasteful industry, and people do things just because that's the way we've always done it.
Yeah.
Rather than looking at, well, what am I really trying to do? And I think that's certainly true. But I also think you need to understand the way that it was done before you change it. You can't just go, the way everybody has done it forever is wrong. There might be reasons there you don't get yet, you know?
Yeah.
And those scouts do have a lot of experience.
Yeah, exactly. And that has to be respected. You can upset the apple cart, but you also got to respect the people who've been there before to agree. Now, if they're undermining you or going behind your back, then fuck that. But if they're willing to work with you, then you've got to make it, and you've got to explain it to them so they can get on board. As you said, Steve, he got results, but he's a shit ass leader when it comes to the people that actually work for him. And the better route is obviously make it a more interactive thing where the people can feel ownership about what they are doing, you know?
Well, and they had a good team under these guys. They got Jason Giambi. They found good players because for very little money that was able to put them in competition with the Yankees.
Yeah.
You know, so just treating them with they're not fools, which is kind of how they're treated in the film.
Yes.
Spring training. I was thinking about Major League.
Looking at the spring training roster, you got to be kidding me.
It's so, who are these guys? And not playing well and bobbling grounders, and dropping balls.
So true.
Scott Hatterberg. He's a really interesting guy in the book. What's interesting in the book, although he's really nervous about playing first base and really doesn't know how to do it at first, he is way more on board and way smarter. Like, if you listen to his philosophy of hitting, which came from him first, and it melded really well with what the A's were doing. But he was really, really thoughtful about hitting and analysis. You would actually love this part of the book, I'm sure, because the analysis of which pitch and what position in the strike zone and when to take the ball and all that stuff was fascinating.
You know, Steve, I think, and I want to read this book. I think people who discount baseball or any sport really as a simple thing, you just hit the ball, are really disrespectful to the game, because it takes such a talent to be able to do this and such a mind. And we want to default to like, oh, jocks are dumb, you know, the stereotype of that. But the great players are phenomenally intelligent about the game. Basketball as well. You really see it in basketball because the Sabermetrics in basketball now is phenomenal. I mean, they have a convention every year. They have a 3-day convention where they talk about metrics in sports now. And I'd love to find my way to get into that because it is fascinating. And what Hatterberg is talking about is how a lot of these players had begun to approach the game at that time, you know, the analytics of it all and putting it onto paper and mental stuff like that. So it's phenomenal. So you're making me more excited to read the book. For sure.
I think you'd like it. I really do.
Yeah.
It's a really enjoyable, well written book. But Art Howe does not have a good feeling about Hatterberg.
It's day one of the first week. Can't judge this yet.
No, I think we can judge it. I like him, but I can judge him.
Which, again, I totally agree with.
Yeah.
This guy is a professional baseball manager. That is his job, to look at players and judge them, you know?
Right.
You know, like, it's like if I was having auditions for actors and someone said, you can't judge the actors. Like, no, yeah, I can. That's my job.
Yeah.
I might not always be right, but I can judge actors. And many of them are not good.
First base is the moon to him.
It wasn't to Giambi. Giambi's the worst first baseman in all of baseball.
You're going to compare him to Giambi.
What are we talking about here?
All right.
By the way, this conflict really didn't exist.
Yeah, it never happened, of course. Yeah.
All of the sort of, I mean, yes, it took Howe some adjustment, and he didn't always want to do but the idea that they were just in total battle all the time, it's just not, that's not reality.
Yeah.
What do you think, Wash?
The nice way to say it is he lacks confidence.
Well, give him some.
And so now, when he manages to pick up a grounder, they go, picking machine.
Like it's Little League. Little League all over again.
That is not what was happening with Hatterberg. He did work a lot with Ron Washington on learning how to be a first baseman.
Yeah, and Ron Washington, for those of you who are baseball fans, you know he went on to manage the Texas Rangers to the World Series a few years later. So yeah, a great coach and manager for the baseball, for Major League Baseball.
It's opening day, April 1st, 2002. We see people walking over that bridge that I was talking about to the Coliseum. We hear "Don't Stop Believing." And I love that David Justice goes to get a soda and they tell him it's $1. He's like, you got to pay for the sodas? Welcome to Oakland.
Major League, right? Like you said.
Totally Major League.
And of course, David Justice says that never happened.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah. But it's a funny moment. It's a funny moment and really kind of reinforces the underdog approach to this team.
So Jeremy Giambi, let's face it, I mean, they're getting a deal with you. The Yankees are paying Jason a whole lot of money and you are coming here on a dime. How does that make you feel?
I love all these interviews because we have the reporter in the locker room and she is the most aggressive, insulting, condescending reporter ever.
I had a lot of respect. You got to succeed in this business. Sometimes you got to push some people around as a woman to get a little respect in the locker room. So I appreciated her approach to it. She got to get her story.
Well, here we are just minutes away from the season opener of 2002 for the Oakland A's. Don't leave us now. Opening day is upon us.
Typical baseball opening. And Brad Pitt is there. And then he goes over to Jonah Hill and says,
I'm going in. Text me the play-by-play. What? Why? I don't watch the games.
And this is true. He didn't watch the games.
Isn't that crazy, Steve? He didn't watch the games, yet he was so into creating a winning team, but he had a superstition about watching the games. I used to be like that. I had a year or two where I wouldn't watch any Redskins games. I would just hear about the score because I was convinced, and I know there's a lot of you sports fans who are listening to us, you're convinced that you're either the good luck or the bad luck for the team that you love. And it's so out there in the weirdness of the world, but you legitimately believe that if you wear a certain jersey, if you eat a certain meal, if you get a haircut that day, or don't, if you have sex that night or the morning of the game, like all these things factor into you as a fan, and you go, I'm the reason they lost. I didn't do this thing that I thought that I should have done. And Billy Beane legitimately believes that he is a cooler, using a gambling term, for his team.
It's funny. I am so not superstitious. I'm almost superstitiously not superstitious. Like I will walk under the ladder to make a point. You know what I mean?
Tempting fate. I appreciate it.
And yet I have those thoughts.
Yeah.
Like,
right.
I didn't believe enough. I didn't,
Yeah, that's the game.
Well, and you feel like, particularly if you're at the game, you feel like I am a part of this thing. You know?
That's the beauty of sports, man. Have you been to opening days? Have you been to a number of opening days ever in your life?
I have. Believe it or not, I know this sounds crazy. My dad took me out of school every year for opening day at Candlestick to see the Giants.
Shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Much love to your dad for doing that.
No, it's so fun. Well, the Giants were so important in my house. The Giants and the Cal Bears. The Giant game was always on the radio.
Yeah.
Always. It wasn't. My dad didn't watch the games as much.
Yeah.
He was always listening to the game. And so I knew the 1970s Giants. I knew the whole lineup. I had my favorite players. I believe my favorite player was Darrell Evans because he hit a grand slam home run when I was at a game one time. I went to lots of Giants games.
Yeah.
And it was really funny. So again, it's a lot of digression. So guess what, folks? It's a two-parter. But my father-in-law, Franklin, was a huge Dodger fan. He was a Dodger fan when the Dodgers were in Brooklyn.
Right. Wow.
And so when I went up to the Bay Area, Karen and I think we were probably married at this point, and the Dodgers are playing the Giants. And at this point, I had stopped paying attention to baseball. I didn't pay attention at all. So where I knew the teams in the 70s and the early 80s, by the late 90s or early 2000s, this is probably late 90s because it was at Candlestick, I didn't really care. So I said, I'm with some Dodger fans. You know what? I'll just be a Dodger fan today.
Yeah.
Because I don't, it doesn't matter. This stuff doesn't matter to me. We get to Candlestick and we're walking through the tunnel. And you know how when you walk through the tunnel out into the stadium and it just kind of opens up in front of you and you're in this, I always have an emotional feeling just from the space.
Yeah. That's on purpose.
And I walk into Candlestick where I hadn't been probably in a decade. And I thought of my dad and I went, nope, Giants fan. I'm a Giants fan. I can't, I couldn't root against the Giants.
Right.
Like it was so emotional and obviously related to my father and because baseball and dads, man, that's just like you and soccer with your dad, like this is emotional stuff. And I was like, no, I'm a Giants fan. And I even went to opening day at Pac Bell Park in 2001. So the year before, I don't remember who they were playing then. I've been to lots of opening days.
I didn't experience till I moved here to Los Angeles. Well, I'm in San Diego now, but I was in Los Angeles. I didn't experience the opening day till I moved there. And then I used to go with my old friend Edgar. We'd go opening days. We'd buy 25 game packages at the beginning of the year because we were living together at the time, and then stayed friends for a little while after that. And we would go to opening days. And there was there's always a magic at opening day. There's a hopeful, the possibility of it all. The mayor is there, other people, celebrities show up. It's a great feeling. It's an awesome experience for sure. And you're right. Like me and my dad experienced it when DC United became a soccer team in the 90s and through the MLS and through the glory years and the early years, that going to the opening day of the season. And soccer was great, smelling the grass and the excitement all around. And, even more so with soccer because it's such a niche thing in America at the time that like everybody around you who's there, they are all your people because we are the ones fighting for this thing to be successful by showing up, by patronizing it. We're saying it deserves to exist in this country. It should be successful in this country as a sport. But nothing, and not even the NFL. I've been to an opening day in NFL as well. There's nothing that matches opening day in baseball. Nothing. You're right, Steve. The way it's set up, the way you walk out, the stadiums are built so that when you walk in, you're just kind of blown away by the joy of looking at it and the smell of the grass, the joy, the hopefulness, and the way the sun glistens. If you've got an opening day it's sunny, it's just unforgettable memories for sure.
And it's funny too how different teams have different cultures and their fans have different cultures.
Good point.
Like growing up, because I grew up as a Giants fan, when you went over to the A's, the whole world of the A's is different. Yeah. The Coliseum and the A's was different from the Candlestick and the Giants.
Sure, I'm sure.
And the other two teams was the difference between the 49ers and the Raiders. This are totally different people. And you think about the culture of the Mets or the culture of the Yankees or the Cubs. Like all of these teams, they have history and and it's also why I do understand the fans are going to hate you.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I remember there were years in Oakland where there was 250 people went to an A's game,
Right.
I don't know if it was that small, but they had real problems some of the time.
Yeah.
So Billy heads off to the locker room. There's a beautiful shot of national anthem and that flag opening up. It looks absolutely gorgeous. Peter Brand is in the computer room watching. And he's got to be freaking out at this moment.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he doesn't have Billy Beane's confidence, arrogance, intensity.
Yeah.
He's just a kid, man.
Yeah.
And Billy will like snap on the radio for a second and then snap it off. By the way, I don't think it's just that he thinks he's a cooler, although I think he does. Mm-hmm. I think he emotionally can't handle it.
Oh, that's fair as well. Absolutely fair as well.
It's so funny. There are some people I know who can't watch sports because they get too emotionally involved.
Yeah.
Like they just can't handle it.
Understood.
And he's getting texts from Peter saying that Art Howe is not playing the team that he wanted him to.
Yeah.
He's got Pena at first. He doesn't send Chad Bradford out for the relief pitcher.
Right.
And that means all of this is for nothing. And now we have a meeting with Art Howe. And it's really the only time that Billy shows any sense that maybe he didn't handle this right.
I should have made you a bigger part of the conversation from day one. That way it'd be clear what we're trying to do here. That was my mistake.
But then he says, it doesn't matter what moves I make if you don't play the team the way they are designed to be played.
Billy, you're out of your depth.
You're out of your depth, man. You're out of your depth. Donnie, you're out of your depth.
You're out of your depth, Donnie.
I would have rather seen Bradford in the end than McNaughty.
Bradford's a righty.
I don't care about righty-lefty.
I do.
Well, and it's funny because I don't, you would know the statistics better for me. My understanding is that is a real statistic.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. You want to line up the batters against certain pitchers at the counter of the right to the left. Yeah, absolutely.
Could this be about your contract?
No. This is about you doing your job and me doing mine.
Philip Seymour Hoffman's so good in this scene.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't assemble him for you, Art.
No shit.
Which I think is a great shot. That's a great shot.
Well, and Billy just can't resist being a dick at the end.
Good meeting. Every time we talk, I'm reinvigorated by my love of the game.
And then again, it's full Brad Pitt, that silly walk away.
I love the monster thing he does as he's walking away too. It's like it's so weird.
It's totally weird.
He's like, if I can punch you, I really would, but I can't punch you. So yeah.
All right, we got Grady Fuson on the line, former head of scouting with the Oakland Athletics. And Grady, can you interpret for us what's going on?
They call it Moneyball.
Moneyball.
Yes, and it was a nice theory, and now it's just not working out.
They didn't call it Moneyball. Moneyball is a name invented by Michael Lewis, who wrote the book. They never called it that.
Billy Beane has built this team on the ideas of a guy named Bill James.
Right.
The problem is that Bill James never played, never managed. He was, in fact, a security guard at a pork and beans company.
By the way, I didn't look up to see if he actually had that job.
He did. He did. He was overnight security guard, which is how he was able to write this stuff in his 20s. He was an overnight security guard for a number of years. He started writing this stuff when he was in his 20s. So it was only over years and years of writing this stuff that he eventually got some kind of attention for. But yeah, that's when he first started writing. He would sit overnight, and he said, as a security guard, they didn't bother me. They left me alone. It was an abandoned factory. I just had to sit there, so I had to fill my time, and I loved baseball. So I thought of a new way into the game. So incredibly intelligent guy, man.
Do you see this as a decimation of the whole organization?
I think that he bought a ticket on the Titanic.
Oh, boy.
And I think as the A's are starting to sink into the ocean of the American League West, this is as good a time of any to end part one of our exploration of Moneyball. As always, we want to hear your thoughts on the film. Please visit us on our Facebook page. Do a search for the Cine-Files. You can follow the Cine-Files at Cine_Files on Twitter, the Cine-Files podcast on Instagram. You can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on YouTube. Leave your comments on YouTube. Reviews on Apple Podcasts, they still matter. If you haven't reviewed the show yet, even if you listen to the show on Spotify or somewhere else, make your way to the Apple page and leave us a review. It really, really helps. The other thing that helps is support the show on patreon.com/thecine-files, where you can pick a film that we're going to do. You can ask questions about some of our upcoming movies, get advanced information on our upcoming films, and of course, listen to our Cine-Files shorts, which we try to do every week. And if you want to reach me, you can do it at SR Morris on Twitter, SR Morris1 on Instagram. John, how about you?
You can always find me at The Rocha Says on Twitter and on Instagram. See all the things I'm doing there. And then head on over to my YouTube page, youtube.com/John Rocha Says. See all the great content we got over there. Geek Buddies, reviews, trailer reactions, sports stuff, politics stuff. Steve's been on a number of channels on Impolite Truth. So go and head on over there too as well and enjoy content there.
And I think that's it for this week. We will see you next time for part 2 of Moneyball on the Cine-Files.